They kissed at the altar, and the crowd erupted in applause. But you saw it, didn't you? That fraction of a second where her smile cracked, where his eyes went somewhere else, somewhere cold. You watched two strangers bind themselves in ceremony, while the priest spoke of eternal devotion, and you wondered if anyone else in that room could taste the lie hanging in the air like smoke. They can't, but you can. Because you've been there, or you're heading there, or you're trapped there right now, standing at the edge of a decision that everyone around you celebrates, while something in your chest screams that this is wrong. Marriage without love, it's not the exception, it's the rule. And the world has spent centuries dressing it up in white lace and diamond rings so you won't notice the chains. You think you're supposed to feel something. That's the first trap. You scroll through their vacation photos, their anniversary posts, the carefully curated evidence of happiness, and you wonder why you feel so empty when you look at the person lying next to you. Society sold you a fantasy. They told you love conquers all. They fed you movies where passion solves poverty, where attraction pays mortgages, where feeling butterflies in your stomach somehow translates to a functioning partnership when the lights go out and real life begins. But here's what they didn't tell you. Love is a luxury, and most people can't afford luxuries. So they settle, they calculate, they marry for reasons that have nothing to do with the heart and everything to do with survival. You marry because you're tired of dating, tired of being alone, tired of your mother asking when you're going to settle down, tired of watching everyone else pair off while you sit at the singles table at weddings, smiling through the shame. So you pick someone, not the one who sets your soul on fire, the one who's available, the one who makes sense on paper, the one whose flaws you can tolerate. And you convince yourself that this is maturity, that real love isn't fireworks and passion, it's compatibility, partnership, a decision you make every day. But let's strip away the poetry for a second. You chose security over desire. You chose convenience over connection. You chose not to be alone over actually being seen. The marketplace doesn't care about your feelings. And marriage, when you peel back every layer of romantic delusion, is a transaction. You bring something to the table. They bring something to the table. You negotiate terms without ever saying you're negotiating. She needs stability, a provider, someone who won't leave when things get hard. He needs validation, domestic comfort, proof to the world that he's successful enough to lock down a partner. Both need the social acceptance that comes with conforming to the script. So you shake hands over shared interests and compatible schedules and call it love, because calling it what it actually is, a strategic alliance, makes you feel like a sociopath. But the sociopaths are the ones who see clearly. They just don't have the guilt about it that you do. You look at marriages that lasted 50 years, And you think that's goals. You think that's proof. But you never ask what those 50 years actually looked like behind closed doors. How many of those nights were spent in silence, in separate beds, in quiet resentment that calcified into acceptance? How many of those couples stayed together because divorce was shameful, because they had children, because unraveling a shared life was more terrifying than enduring a dead one? Longevity isn't evidence of love. Sometimes it's evidence of resignation, of two people who decided that the devil they know beats the uncertainty of starting over. And society rewards them for it, gives them anniversary parties, calls them relationship goals, holds them up as proof that marriage works. But what actually worked? The love or the commitment to the performance of love. You meet someone and there's no spark, but they check boxes: educated, stable income, wants kids, good family, similar values. Your friends approve. Your parents are relieved. And you think maybe this is it. Maybe you've been watching too many movies. Maybe real relationships are built on friendship and compatibility, not that electric pull that kept you up at night with the wrong people. So you date. You introduce them to your world. You learn their routines, and it's fine. It's comfortable. There's no chaos, no drama, no uncertainty. And you mistake that peace for rightness. But peace isn't always rightness. Sometimes peace is just the absence of challenge, the absence of growth, the absence of that terrifying vulnerability that comes when someone actually reaches the parts of you that you've spent years protecting. This person doesn't reach those parts. They don't even know those parts exist, and that feels safer. So you move forward. The proposal happens because it's time. You've been together long enough that people are asking questions. You're at the age where your friends are all getting married, and you don't want to be left behind. You don't want to start over. You don't want to admit that you've invested 2 years, 3 years, 5 years into something that doesn't light you up. So when they get down on one knee, you say yes. Not because your heart explodes with certainty, but because saying no means facing what you've been avoiding, that you settled, that you chose wrong, that you wasted time. And the human brain will do anything to avoid admitting waste, so you justify. You tell yourself that passion fades anyway, that long-term relationships are about partnership, that you're being mature and realistic, that love grows over time, and maybe it does. But maybe it doesn't. Maybe you're just getting better at lying to yourself. The wedding planning reveals the cracks, but you ignore them. You fight about guest lists and budgets, and whose family gets priority. You notice how they handle stress, how they talk to you when they're tired, how they prioritize their needs over yours in ways that make you feel small. But you're in too deep now. The venue is booked. The invitations went out. Everyone is excited. And you can't be the person who backs out. You can't embarrass your family. You can't waste everyone's time and money. You can't face the questions, the judgment, the whispers. So you push through. You smile for the engagement photos. You pick out flowers and cakes and pretend that this isn't the most terrifying mistake you're about to make. And on the wedding day, when everyone is crying and telling you how beautiful you look, you feel nothing. Or worse, you feel dread. But you walk down that aisle anyway, because turning around isn't an option anymore. The honeymoon phase is actually just relief that it's over. The performance is done. You made it through the wedding without falling apart. Now you can relax into the marriage. Except you can't, because the marriage is when reality hits. When you realize that you're locked into a life with someone who doesn't understand you. Someone who doesn't make you laugh the way you need to laugh. Someone whose touch feels obligatory rather than electric. You lie next to them at night and feel more alone than when you were actually alone. Because at least when you were single, the loneliness made sense. Now you're lonely with a witness, and that's a different kind of torture. You start to notice the marriages around you with new eyes. Your parents who sleep in separate rooms. Your friends who joke about their spouse being annoying. But the jokes have edges. Your co-workers who stay late at the office because going home feels like a prison. You see the pattern everywhere once you're inside it. Most people aren't in love. They're in arrangement. They're cohabiting. They're co-parenting. They're maintaining a structure that society tells them is success, while the interior of that structure rots, and nobody talks about it. Because admitting you married wrong is admitting you failed at the most important decision you're supposed to make. So everyone pretends. Everyone keeps up appearances. Everyone posts the vacation photos and the anniversary tributes, while behind the screen they're Googling whether it's normal to feel this disconnected from your spouse. You wonder if you're broken, if there's something wrong with you for not feeling what you're supposed to feel. You watch movies about grand love and you feel nothing. You read books about passion and you can't relate. You see couples who seem genuinely happy and you assume they're either lying or stupid. Because from where you're standing, love looks like a con, a trick society plays to get you to reproduce and contribute to the economy and maintain the status quo. Marriage isn't about connection. It's about construction, building a life that looks acceptable from the outside while you decay on the inside. And you're so tired of decaying, so tired of pretending, so tired of wondering if this is all there is. But here's the thing they don't tell you, the thing that makes this even darker. You might be right. You might have made the wrong choice. You might have married someone you don't love and will never love the way the poets promised. And you might stay anyway, not because you're weak, not because you're scared, but because leaving doesn't guarantee anything better. Because starting over at your age, with your history, with your damage, feels impossible. Because the alternative to a mediocre marriage might be decades of loneliness punctuated by failed relationships and false starts. So you calculate again. You weigh the misery you know against the misery you don't. And sometimes the misery you know wins, not because it's better, but because it's predictable. And humans crave predictability more than they crave happiness. That's the secret they won't tell you in the wedding vows. That sometimes love isn't enough, and sometimes it was never there to begin with. And sometimes you know that from the start, and you go through with it anyway. Because the alternative is facing the void alone. And the void terrifies you more than a lifetime of pretending. The void terrifies you, but the performance exhausts you. Every morning you wake up and put on the mask. You kiss them goodbye. You text during lunch. You ask about their day when you get home. You maintain the rhythm because rhythm is what keeps the lie alive. But inside you're calculating. Inside you're running numbers. How many years until the kids are grown? How much longer until retirement, when you can live separate lives, under the same roof, without anyone questioning it? How many more anniversaries you have to celebrate before it's socially acceptable to just exist side by side in silent agreement that this isn't what either of you wanted, but it's what you've bought. And the calculation itself becomes a kind of comfort. Because if you can predict the misery, you can manage it. If you can schedule your disappointment, you can survive it. You start to understand why people have affairs, not because they're evil or selfish or broken, because they're suffocating, because somewhere in the machinery of a loveless marriage, the human need for connection doesn't disappear, it just gets buried. And buried things don't die quietly. They fester, they claw. They demand attention in the middle of the night, when you're lying next to someone who feels like a stranger. So people stray, not because the person they're cheating with is better, but because that person makes them feel alive in a way their spouse stopped making them feel years ago, if they ever did at all. The affair isn't about sex. It's about remembering what it feels like to be seen, to be wanted, to have someone look at you like you're not just a function in their life, but an actual person worth pursuing. And you judge them until you understand them, until you're in a position where one kind word from the wrong person could unravel everything you've built. The psychology behind this goes deeper than anyone wants to admit. Humans are hierarchical creatures. We rank, we assess, we determine value based on what we can extract from each other. And marriage, stripped of all its romantic packaging, is a value exchange. You trade your youth, your beauty, your fertility, your earning potential, your domestic labor, your emotional support, your social status. You put these assets on the table, and you negotiate for the best deal you can get. Love, if it exists at all, is a bonus, a pleasant side effect of a transaction that would happen anyway. Because here's what nobody tells you when you're young and stupid and watching Disney movies. People don't marry the person they love most. They marry the person who's available when they're ready to settle. Timing beats passion every single time. You were option 3 for your spouse, maybe option 5, and they were option 2 for you. The person you actually wanted didn't want you back. Or they did, but the timing was wrong. Or they were too chaotic, too unstable, too risky to build a life with. So you both compromised. You found someone good enough. Someone who met the minimum requirements. Someone whose flaws you could live with. And you convinced yourselves that this is wisdom. That choosing with your head instead of your heart is maturity. But there's a difference between wisdom and cowardice. Wisdom is understanding that passion fades and choosing partnership anyway. Cowardice is never feeling the passion to begin with and pretending that makes you enlightened. Society needs you married, not happy. Married, because married people are predictable. They consume predictably. They work predictably. They raise the next generation of workers predictably. They don't rock the boat. They don't chase dreams that might destabilize the system. They're too busy managing mortgages and school schedules and retirement accounts to question whether any of this matters. Marriage without love is the perfect control mechanism. It keeps you compliant. It keeps you tired. It keeps you convinced that sacrifice is noble and that suffering in silence is strength. And you bought it. You signed the contract. You put the ring on. You made the vows. Now you're locked in a system designed to benefit everyone but you. The shift happens when you stop fighting it, when you stop trying to manufacture feelings that aren't there, when you accept that this is what you chose and this is what you're living, and no amount of couples therapy or date nights or communication workshops is going to create chemistry that never existed. You can't negotiate desire. You can't schedule passion. You can't create attraction through sheer force of will. Either it's there or it isn't. And if it isn't, you have 3 choices: leave, cheat, or weaponize the lovelessness. Most people choose option 3 without even realizing it. They turn the marriage into a strategic partnership. They stop expecting emotional fulfillment and start extracting practical value. Financial security, social legitimacy, childcare support, a built-in companion for holidays and funerals. The loneliness is still there, but now it serves a purpose. Now it's fuel. You stop seeing your spouse as a person you're supposed to love and start seeing them as a resource you're supposed to manage. Their income becomes your leverage. Their family connections become your network. Their weaknesses become your ammunition for future negotiations. This sounds sociopathic, but it's actually just clarity. because they're doing the same thing to you, whether they admit it or not. Every marriage is a power struggle. Every relationship is a game of chess. And the people who pretend it's not, the ones posting about soulmates and forever, they're either lying or losing. You decided you're not going to lose. You're going to play the game better than anyone expects. You're going to extract maximum value from a minimum investment of genuine emotion. You're going to treat marriage like the business transaction it always was, and stop apologizing for it. The darkness becomes your advantage, while other people are drowning in guilt about not loving their spouse enough. You're free. You're not burdened by the expectation of authentic connection. You're not disappointed when date night feels forced or when sex feels mechanical, because you never expected magic to begin with. You see the relationship for what it is: a functional arrangement between two people who need each other more than they want each other. And that clarity gives you power. You stop trying to fix what was never whole. You stop reading relationship books looking for answers to questions that don't have answers. You accept that some marriages are built on love, and some are built on necessity, and yours is the latter, and that's fine. Better than fine. Because necessity is more reliable than love. Necessity doesn't fade. Necessity doesn't get bored. Necessity keeps showing up, even when everything else dies. You watch your friends go through divorces, and you don't envy their freedom. You pity their naivety. They actually believed the lie. They thought marriage was supposed to make them happy. They thought they deserved passion and partnership and mutual growth. So when they didn't get it, they burned everything down. They paid lawyers. They split assets. They traumatized their kids. They spent years rebuilding, and for what? To end up in another mediocre relationship 5 years later, with different problems, but the same fundamental disappointment. You're smarter than that. You understand that the problem isn't your spouse. The problem is the expectation. The problem is the myth that there's someone out there who will complete you, who will understand you, who will make life feel like a movie. There isn't. There's just other humans with their own damage and their own agendas and their own capacity for selfishness. And you can either keep searching for the unicorn, or you can build with the horse you've got. The psychology of staying in a loveless marriage is actually more complex than the psychology of leaving. Leaving is easy. It's dramatic. It's the plot twist. It's the thing people understand and even celebrate now in this age of self-actualization and finding yourself. But staying takes a different kind of strength. It takes the ability to compartmentalize, to separate your need for romantic fulfillment from your need for stability, to understand that you can have a full life without having a passionate marriage. You can have friendships that nourish you emotionally, hobbies that challenge you intellectually, work that gives you purpose, and a spouse who serves a function in your life without being the center of it. This is how most successful people operate. They don't confuse their marriage with their identity. They don't need their partner to be everything. They build a portfolio of relationships and experiences that together create meaning. And the marriage is just one component, sometimes the least important one. You start to notice that the happiest married people aren't the ones who love each other most. They're the ones who need each other least. They have separate interests, separate friend groups, separate bank accounts sometimes. They've created lives that overlap but don't merge. They're not codependent. They're interdependent. There's a difference. Codependence is desperation masked as devotion. Interdependence is choice. It's two people who could survive alone, but choose not to because together they can build something bigger than themselves. And that building isn't about feelings. It's about outcomes. You want kids raised in a stable home. You need 2 incomes, 2 sets of hands, 2 adults willing to divide and conquer. You want financial security. You need someone to share the mortgage, to pick up slack when you lose your job, to contribute to retirement accounts. You want social status. You need a +1 at events, someone to make you look settled and successful, a partner who elevates your position in the community. These are legitimate needs. These are valid reasons to stay married, and they have nothing to do with love. The fuel you pull from this darkness is the fuel of purpose without pretense. You're not performing anymore. You're operating. You're running a household, raising children if you have them, building wealth, maintaining appearances not because you care what others think, but because social capital has value, and you're not stupid enough to waste it. Your marriage becomes efficient, transactional in the best way. You both know what's expected. You both deliver. There's no ambiguity, no games, no wondering if they really love you, because you stop caring about that question. What matters is, can they pay their half of the bills? Can they show up to family functions? Can they maintain the structure while you maintain your interior world separately? And if they can, then the marriage works. Not in a romantic sense, in a practical sense, which is the only sense that matters when you're trying to survive in a system designed to crush individual dreams in favor of collective compliance. You become colder, harder, more calculating, and people will call this cynical, but you know it's just realistic. You've seen behind the curtain. You know that most people are lying about their marriages. You know that the Instagram posts and the anniversary letters are cope mechanisms for people who can't admit they settled. And you refuse to cope. You refuse to lie to yourself. You'd rather live in acknowledged darkness than delusional light, because the darkness is where strategy lives. The darkness is where you stop being a victim of circumstance and start being an architect of outcomes. You didn't marry for love, but you can still build a life worth living. You just have to accept that fulfillment doesn't come from your spouse. It comes from you, from your choices, from your willingness to extract meaning from a situation that was never designed to give it. The extraction is an art form. You learn to take what you need without giving what you can't afford to lose. Your spouse wants emotional labor. You give them the performance of emotional labor. The right words at the right time, the appearance of engagement without the energy expenditure of actual presence. You master the script. How was your day becomes a reflex, not a question. I love you becomes punctuation, not a declaration. You're doing great becomes a placeholder for, I've stopped measuring your worth against my expectations. This isn't cruelty. This is conservation. You're rationing your authentic self for the people and moments that actually deserve it. Your spouse stopped deserving it the moment you both silently agreed this marriage was infrastructure, not intimacy. The children complicate everything or simplify everything, depending on how you look at it. If you have them, they become the reason you can't leave and the reason you don't want to. Not because you're staying for the kids in that pathetic, sacrificial way people claim, but because the kids give the marriage objective value beyond the failed romantic experiment. You're not two people pretending to love each other anymore. You're two people operating a child, rearing enterprise. And enterprises need structure, division of labor, clear roles and responsibilities. Your spouse becomes co-founder, not soulmate, and that reframe is liberation. You can evaluate their performance as a parent, as a financial contributor, as a household manager, without the noise of whether they make your heart race. They don't. They never did. But they remember to sign the permission slips, and they show up to the recitals, and they split the mental load of keeping small humans alive. That's worth something. That's worth staying for. If you don't have children, the calculation shifts, but the principle holds. You're building wealth together. You're aging in a world that punishes solitary aging. You're maintaining a home that would cost twice as much if you were doing it alone. You're keeping each other's secrets, covering each other's weaknesses, presenting a united front to a world that's looking for cracks to exploit. Marriage without love becomes a military alliance. Two nations with different cultures and different values, agreeing not to destroy each other, because mutual destruction benefits neither. You don't have to like your ally. You don't have to understand them. You just have to honor the treaty. And the treaty says we stay in formation. We defend the shared territory. We don't air the private failures in public spaces. The execution of this mindset requires discipline that most people don't have. It requires you to kill the part of yourself that still believes in fairy tales, the part that watches romantic movies and feels that pang of what if. the part that sees genuinely connected couples and feels envy instead of skepticism. You have to murder that optimism. Bury it so deep it stops, whispering to you at 3 in the morning when you're lying next to someone whose breathing irritates you, because that optimism will sabotage everything you've built. It will make you resentful. It will make you question. It will make you wonder if you deserve better. And maybe you do deserve better. But better isn't coming. Better is a myth sold to keep you dissatisfied, keep you consuming, keep you searching for products and services and therapies that promise to fix what isn't actually broken. Your marriage isn't broken. It's just honest. It's just a relationship stripped of the lies that make other relationships look functional. You start moving through your days like a ghost in your own life, not depressed, not checking out, but detached. You're present for the logistics. You show up for the obligations. You perform the necessary rituals, but your mind is elsewhere, planning, strategizing, building the parts of your life that don't require your spouse's participation. Maybe you throw yourself into your career. Maybe you develop obsessive hobbies. Maybe you cultivate friendships that feed the parts of you that your marriage starves. This isn't escape. This is survival architecture. You're constructing a life where your marriage is the foundation, but not the structure. It holds things up, but it doesn't define the shape of what you're building. And your spouse is doing the same thing, whether they admit it or not. They have their own parallel existence, their own emotional outlets, their own spaces where they remember who they were before they became half of a loveless union. The intimacy dies first, or it was never alive to begin with. Sex becomes another chore, another item on the list of things you do to maintain the relationship. You schedule it if you're disciplined. You fake enthusiasm if you're kind. You disassociate if you're tired. Your body is there, but you're not. You're thinking about tomorrow's meetings, or the leak in the bathroom, or anything other than the person moving on top of you. And they know. Of course they know. But they don't say anything, because saying something means having a conversation neither of you wants to have. A conversation about desire and attraction, and the fundamental absence of chemistry that you've both been ignoring since the beginning. So you keep quiet. You finish the transaction. You roll over. You return to your separate sides of the bed. And in the morning, you'll both pretend it was fine, because fine is all you're aiming for anymore. The world keeps telling you that you should leave. Self-help gurus preaching about authenticity. Divorced friends talking about how free they feel. Therapists suggesting that you deserve passion. But you're not interested in their advice, because their advice comes from a place of privilege. They think everyone can afford to blow up their life in pursuit of undefined happiness. They think starting over is always better than staying. They don't understand that some people have calculated the cost of freedom and found it too expensive. Not just financially, emotionally, socially. The cost of admitting you were wrong. The cost of disappointing the people who celebrated your wedding. The cost of dating again in your 40s or 50s, when the pool is full of other people's damage and everyone is performing their best selves while hiding their worst. You'd rather stay in known misery than gamble on unknown outcomes. That's not weakness. That's pattern recognition. You become a student of other people's marriages. You watch them at dinner parties. You listen to how they talk to each other. You notice the micro expressions, the subtle digs disguised as jokes, the way they check their phones instead of making eye contact. And you realize everyone is faking it. The couple that everyone envies is fighting in the car on the way home. The pair that posts constant couple photos hasn't had sex in 6 months. The ones who seem so in love are both on antidepressants just to tolerate their shared existence. Marriage is a performance art, and everyone is lying about how well the show is going. But you've stopped performing for anyone except the essential audience. You still smile at the family gatherings. You still hold hands in the holiday photo. But you've accepted that it's theater, and the only crime in theater is breaking character. So you don't break. You hold the line. You maintain the illusion not for them, but for you. Because the illusion is easier than the truth. The power shift happens slowly. You start to realize that staying in a loveless marriage gives you more control than leaving ever could. You're not the desperate one anymore. You're not the one hoping for change. You've accepted the situation so completely that you're no longer vulnerable to disappointment. Your spouse can't hurt you with their indifference because you expect nothing else. They can't threaten you with withdrawal because you're not dependent on their approval. You've built emotional independence inside a legal partnership, and that independence makes you dangerous. Not dangerous like you're going to do something destructive. Dangerous like you're untouchable. Like you've figured out how to exist in a system designed to trap you, and somehow remained free inside the cage. You stop asking questions that have no good answers. Do you love me? Are you happy? Is this what you wanted? These questions are traps. They force acknowledgement of things that function better in shadow. Instead, you ask practical questions. Did you pay the utility bill? Are we still going to your parents for Thanksgiving? What time is the appointment? You reduce the relationship to logistics because logistics can be solved. Feelings can't. Feelings are quicksand. The more you struggle with them, the deeper you sink. So you step around them. You build a path made of task lists and shared calendars and financial spreadsheets. And you walk that path every day without looking down at what you're avoiding. The loneliest moment isn't when you're by yourself. It's when you're with your spouse and realize you'd rather be alone. When their presence feels like an imposition instead of a comfort. When you catch yourself calculating how many hours until they leave for work or go to bed or travel for business. When you start structuring your life to minimize contact with the person you're supposed to be closest to. That's when you know the marriage has fully inverted. It's no longer a relationship you're in. It's a situation you're managing. And management requires distance, objectivity, the ability to make decisions based on outcomes, not emotions. You train yourself to stop feeling guilty. Guilt is useless. Guilt is what people use to keep you trapped in frameworks that don't serve you. You're supposed to feel guilty for not loving your spouse enough, for not trying harder, for not being more present. But guilt requires the belief that you owe someone something beyond what was contractually agreed. And what was contractually agreed was partnership. Fidelity, maybe, depending on your specific arrangement. Financial contribution, legal commitment. Nowhere in the marriage contract does it say you have to feel butterflies. Nowhere does it say you have to want them the way you wanted the ones who got away. So you stop feeling guilty for not feeling. You accepted the terms. You're honoring the agreement. What you feel or don't feel is nobody's business, not even theirs. The dark psychology here is understanding that humans are transactional, whether they admit it or not. Every relationship is cost benefit analysis wearing different masks. Your parents stayed together because divorce was shameful and starting over was harder than enduring. Your grandparents stayed together because women couldn't own property and men couldn't cook. Every generation has its reasons for maintaining loveless marriages. And every generation pretends their reasons are more noble than they are. You're just honest about it. You're staying because leaving costs more than staying, because the disruption isn't worth the potential upside, because you've built a life that functions and dismantling it. It would destroy more than just a marriage. It would destroy the carefully constructed stability you've spent years building. And for what? The possibility of finding something better. The odds are bad. The math doesn't work, so you stay and you stop apologizing for it. The final piece is recognizing that this is how most of history operated. Marrying for love is a recent invention, a luxury of societies wealthy enough to prioritize individual happiness over collective survival. For most of human existence, people married for alliances, for resources, for protection, for continuation of bloodlines. Love was irrelevant. It was a bonus if it happened, but nobody expected it. Nobody built their life around it. They built their life around survival, around advancing their position, around securing their children's futures. And somehow the species continued. Somehow people found meaning. Somehow life happened without the romantic love that modern society insists is essential. You're just returning to the default setting. You're operating the way humans operated for thousands of years before Hallmark convinced everyone that marriage should make you feel complete. Join the few who see it, the ones who understand that marriage is a tool, not a destination. The ones who stopped waiting for their spouse to make them happy and started building happiness independently. The ones who weaponized their lovelessness into fuel for everything else. You're not broken for not loving the person you married. You're awake, and being awake in a world of sleepwalkers gives you an edge they'll never understand. They're still hoping, still trying, still believing the lie. You've moved past hope into strategy, past trying into execution, past believing into knowing. And what you know is this: love is optional, but power is essential. Your loveless marriage is your foundation for power. Use it. Build on it. Stop apologizing for it. The cage is real, but you hold the keys to everything that matters. Your mind, your purpose, your capacity to extract value from a situation everyone else would call a failure. That's not surviving. That's winning a game most people don't even know they're playing.